Good evening, everyone. I am Stephen Sempel, legal ordained reverend of the church, a chaplain, church, a priest, preceptor, preacher, also a father, a padre, honorary Bible historian. I am a certified human rights consultant, certified U.S. Institute of Diplomacy and Human Rights, and I'm also a child rights consultant, certified by U.S. Institute of Diplomacy and Human Rights. I'm a doctor in divinity, humanitism, ministry, metaphysics, and, of course, our professor of theology. So this is going to be basically what I tried to actually do the other day, a week ago. With everything that is going on right now, as was especially the past number of days, with how many people are being deported with their human rights violated by the Trump administration, tonight in this video, I'm going to teach you how, and I might add, how. So, hi everyone. So I'm going to teach you how specifically to report human rights violations to organizations and, of course, to the United Nations. I'm also going to teach you all 30 articles in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And again, with everything that's happened in the past number of days, especially concerning here these mass deportations, which of course is correctly ruled as ethnic cleansing. So yeah, I don't got my studio up and presented, so I'm not anything nice, but presentable enough to do this presentation. So yes, as a minister. Now back to it. So to start this off, let me go directly to my last, so for May, so update on child rights and human rights. So again, with everything that's happening right now, where American children who are legal U.S. citizens being deported, human trafficked by the Trump administration, and unconstitutional international breaking deportation, with mayors being arrested by Trump, with senators as well at this point, and congressmen, with mayors, and with Stephen Miller, Trump's advisor and original creator of Trump's zero-tolerance immigration policy, where children placed in cages, proposing the revoking habeas corpus, as well as further human rights violations. The fact you couldn't trust people in your life who are suffering from mass psychosis due to their indoctrination, their human messiah, of where they couldn't be trusted with human life, especially with anthrax hiding place, is very real to all the families who have been ripped apart in the past month and into this month of June and more, and through everything that's happening right now. So Trump's mass deportation program, which was correctly ruled as ethnic cleansing, according to the United Nations definition of ethnic cleansing, so going back to that, which is rendering an area ethnically homogeneous by using force or intimidation to remove persons of given groups from an area, a purposeful policy designed by one ethnic or religious group to remove, by violent and terror-inspiring means, the civilian population of another ethnic or religious group from certain geographic areas. United Nations Office on Genocide Prevention and the responsibility to protect. Again, ethnic cleansing is the correct ruling concerning Trump administration's racist and xenophobic removal of all immigrants of ethnicities that Donald J. Trump despises. If you want to know why racism is a mental illness, I do directly cover this in my human rights presentation paper, which of course will be linked to this video as well. So I do affirm this as a certified human rights consultant, certified by the U.S. Institute of Diplomacy and Human Rights. One of America's forefathers has this to say about habeas corpus. Habeas corpus secures every man here, alien or citizen, against everything which is not law, whatever shape it may be. We're assuming this is by Thomas Jefferson, 1798. So let's go look at ethnic cleansing war crimes. Definition from Britannica. Ethnic cleansing, the attempt to create ethnically homogeneous geographic areas through the deportation or forcible displacement of persons belonging to particular ethnic groups. Ethnic cleansing sometimes involves the removal of all physical vestiges of the targeted group through the destruction of monuments, cemeteries, houses of worship. The term ethnic cleansing, a literal translation of the Serbio-Croatian phrase etnico čišćenje, was widely employed in the 1990s, though the term first appeared earlier to describe the brutal treatment of various civilian groups in the conflicts that erupted upon the disintegration of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. These groups included Bosniaks, Bosnian Muslims, and Bosnian Herzegovina, Serbs in the Krajina region of Croatia, and ethnic Albanians, and later Serbs in the Serbian province of Kosovo. The term also has been attached to the treatment of Indonesian militants of the people of Eastern Timor, many of whom killed or forced to abandon their homes after citizens were voted in favor of independence in 1999, and the plight of the Chechens who fled Grozny and other areas of Chechnya following Russian military operations against Chechen separatists during the 1990s. According to the report issued by the United Nations Secretary General, the frequent course of ethnic cleansing in the 1990s was attributed to the nature of contemporary armed conflicts in which civilian casualties and the destruction of civilian infrastructure are not simply byproducts of war, but the consequence of deliberate, targeted non-combatants. In many conflicts, belligerents targeting civilians in order to expel or eradicate segments of the population, or for the purpose of hastening military surrender. Ethnic cleansing as a concept has generated considerable controversy. Some critics see little difference between it and genocide. Defenders, however, argue that ethnic cleansing and the genocide can be distinguished by the intent of the perpetrator. Whereas the primary goal of genocide is the destruction of ethnic, racial, or religious group, the main purpose of ethnic cleansing is the establishment of ethnically homogeneous lands which may be achieved by any number of methods, including genocide. Another major controversy concerns the question of whether or not ethnic cleansing originated in the 20th century. Some scholars have pointed to the forced resettlement of millions of people by the Assyrians in the 9th and 7th centuries BC as perhaps the first case of ethnic cleansing. Among the examples cited are the mass execution of Danes by the English in 1002, attempt by the Czechs to rid their territories of Germans in the Middle Ages, and expulsions used from Spain in the 15th century, and the forced display of Native Americans by white settlers in North America in the 18th and 19th centuries. Others argue that ethnic cleansing, unlike earlier acts of forced resettlement, is a result of certain uniquely 20th century developments, such as the rise of powerful nation-states fueled by nationalist and pseudoscientific racist ideologies, in conjunction with the spread of advanced technology and communications. Examples of ethnic cleansing understood in this sense include the Armenian massacres by the Turks in 1915-16, the Nazi Holocaust of European Jews in the 1930s and 40s, which of course is genocide actually, and the expulsion of Germans from Polish and Czechoslovakian territory after World War II. The Soviet Union's deportation of certain ethnic minorities from the Caucasus and Crimea during the 1940s, and forced migrations and mass killings in the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda in the 1990s. In many of these campaigns, women were targeted for particularly brutal treatment, including the systematic rape and enslavement, in part because they were viewed as perpetrators, as the carriers biologically and culturally of the next generation of their nations. Because many men were victimized, populations left their families and communities to join resistance groups once violence began. Women and children were often defenseless. The precise legal definition of ethnic cleansing has been the subject of intense scrutiny within various international bodies, including the UN. The two ad hoc international tribunals created in the 1990s to prosecute violations of international humanitarian law in the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, ICTY, and the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, ICTR, respectively, and the International Criminal Court, ICC, which began sittings in 2002. In 1992, in reference to hostilities in Yugoslavia, the UN General Assembly declared ethnic cleansing to be a form of genocide. In the following year, the Security Council, citing widespread and flagrant violations of international humanitarian law within the territory of the former Yugoslavia, established a tribunal to investigate allegations of war crimes and crimes against humanity, including ethnic cleansing. An examination of the capture of the town of Kozarek by Bosnian Serbs, the ICTY described the ethnic cleansing that took place there as a process of rounding up and driving out of the area on foot the entire non-Serb population. In a subsequent case, the tribunal recognized similarities between acts of genocide and ethnic cleansing, noting that both involved the targeting of individuals because of their membership in an ethnic group. The significant difference between these two groups, however, whereas ethnic cleansing aims to force the flight of a particular group, genocide targets the group for physical destruction. So, all, of course, as reiterated, the Trump administration is guilty of ethnic cleansing. And I do affirm this as a certified human rights consultant certified at U.S. Institute of Diplomacy and Human Rights. So now that I've got that all out of the way, and I might as well just go take that off for 1 second. There we go. That power cord, I'm going to have to hold this. So, again, ethnic cleansing is the correct rule concerning the Trump administration's racist, xenophobic removal of all immigrations of ethnicities that Donald J. Trump despises. I do affirm this as a certified human rights consultant certified with the U.S. Institute of Diplomacy and Human Rights. So, first things first. So, let me go look at my update for April 2025 where I actually have this, and I will reiterate this. Again, I will reiterate this. How to report human rights violations from the United for Human Rights org. You can and you should report human rights abuses, even if they are not prosecuted publicly or the prospect of an investigation can have a restraining effect on perpetrators. 1. List the specific articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that have been violated. 2. State the facts as far as possible in chronological order. 3. Include the date, time, and place of the incidents, name and position of the perpetrators, place of detention if applicable, names and addresses of any witnesses, and any other important details. So how to report human rights violations, I do have that. Linked, and I will link this, of course, to this video. So this is going to be, again, my live stream video for Instagram of what I tried to do days before. So, how to report human rights violations. So, as a certified human rights consultant, I also link you to the United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner, where you can report human rights violations directly to the UN. And so, OHC, and let's go do that, actually. And right here, reporting violations. So, if you are a victim of human rights abuses or have credible evidence that someone else is a victim, you can turn to the UN for help. How can the UN help? If you want to report a complaint, you can do so with the special procedures of the Human Rights Council, independent human rights experts, the Human Rights Treaty bodies, committees of independent experts, or the Human Rights Council. So, before I get into this, let's have a recap of something that, again, that happened earlier. And I'm going to switch over to, and this is something I did over a week ago. So my human rights complaint to the UN concerning Martir Garcia Lora was a 4th grader. And he and his dad were, of course, in Los Angeles at their immigration hearing, and that's where ICE arbitrarily arrested them and detained them. And Martir's school, so the PTA more specifically, got involved themselves and tried to help ensure Martir's release, although as of stating this, so over a week now, he and his father have been deported back to Honduras. So, please provide a short chronology and the summary of the incident, what happened, dates, when, who. So, on May 29th, 2025, the victim, Martir Garcia Lora, a 4th grader student in Torrance, California school district, was with father Martir Garcia Vanegas while attending an immigration court hearing, were arbitrarily arrested by the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency in Los Angeles, California. The victim and the father, upon being detained, were separated from each other, family separation, which is against the Convention on the Rights of the Child, Articles 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, and 10, and numerous others. Article 9 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, state parties shall ensure that that the child shall not be separated from his or her parents against their will, except when competent authorities, subject to judicial review, determine in accordance with applicable law and procedures that such separation is necessary for the best interest of the child. Such determination may be necessary in a particular case, such as one involving abuse or neglect of the child by the parents, or where the parents are living separately and a decision must be made as to the child's place of residence. In any proceedings pursuant to paragraph 1 of the present article, all interested parties shall be given the opportunity to participate in the proceedings and make their views known. State parties shall respect the right of the child who is separated from one or both their parents to maintain personal relations and direct contact with both parents on a regular basis, except if contrary to the child's best interest. Where such separation results from any action initiated by the state party, such as one or both parents or of the child, that state party shall, upon request, provide the parents, the child, if appropriate, another member of the family with essential information concerning the whereabouts of the absent members of the family, unless the provision of the information would be detrimental to the well-being of the child. State parties shall further ensure that submission of such requests shall, of itself, entail no adverse consequences for the persons concerned, were transferred to the Immigration Detention Facility in Houston, Texas, pending deportation to Honduras, regardless of family separation and possible reunification, which is a guaranteed right in the Convention of the Rights of the Child. So again, I have details of the disappearance, etc., so state parties. So again, it was ICE. And again, as of today, so June 17th, 2025, so Mark Tier and his father were both deported to Honduras. And do I, as a human rights consultant, know if there was any reunification? No. And the thing is, and again, as restated concerning my own human rights campaign, why the United States should adopt the Convention of the Rights of the Child, while the United States of America did sign the Convention of the Rights of the Child, they never ratified it into law. This is why children were caged during Trump's zero-tolerance immigration policy, which, again, the intention was psychological torture, so torture under the Geneva Convention. Okay, so now that I've gotten that out of the way, so before I begin telling you exactly, I just showed you exactly what I did concerning that report, but let's go back to that actually. So who are the perpetrators? And that is where I got to reiterate why. Please specify the perpetrators for, so, ICE, so Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, were alleged perpetrators state agents or believed to be state agents? Yes. During the incident in question that led to the arbitrary arrest, family separation, and detention of the victim, Martir Garcia Lara, ICE agents arbitrarily arrested the victim and their father, separating them and detaining them on May 29th, 2025 in Los Angeles, California, and then transferred them to ICE Immigration Detention Facility in Houston, Texas, and then, of course, they were deported. If the alleged perpetrators were state agents, were they acting in their official capacity? Yes. Yes, in Trump's mass deportation program, his remigration campaign that is correctly ruled as ethnic cleansing, according to the UN's definition of ethnic cleansing, since Trump took office in January 2025, ICE has been rounding up, arbitrarily arresting people, citizens and immigrants alike, and detaining them, those whose nationalities, ethnicities that Trump despises, often without valid signed warrants, breaking of both constitutional law, Amendments 4 to 10 of the U.S. Bill of Rights. So let's go take a look at the U.S. Bill of Rights constitution-wise. So the Fourth Amendment on. The Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by an oath of affirmation, particularly describing the place to be searched and persons or things to be seized. Fifth Amendment, No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in land or naval forces or in the militia, where their actual service in time of war or public danger, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be witness against himself, nor to be deprived of life, liberty, and property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Sixth Amendment. In criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall be committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses of favor, and to have the assistance of a counsel for his defense, aka due process. So continuing on. Seventh Amendment. In suits of common law where the value is in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of the common law. So, Eighth Amendment. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel or unusual punishments inflicted. So again, what the Trump administration did concerning when Trump's zero-tolerance immigration policy and what he's doing now with children still in cages, yes. So cruel and unusual punishment concerning that psychological torture, which of course, again, torture under the Geneva Convention. Ninth Amendment. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. 10th Amendment. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved for the states respectively or to the people. Again, I'm going to go back to my May petition. Again, due process, the fundamental constitutional right to fair legal proceedings in which all parties will be given notice of the proceedings and have an opportunity to be heard. And again, this is by the habeas corpus legaldictionary.net. So again, what constitutional amendments, constitutional laws of the United States of America, and what human rights articles, Universal Declaration of Human Rights of the Trump administration violating, and all these revoking of due process and attempts to remove of habeas corpus, and far more concerning what we are seeing as of today, so June 17th, 2025. The U.S. Bill of Rights constitutional amendments that Trump is violating is, again, 4th Amendment through 10th. So the 4th Amendment protects against unlawful search and seizure by U.S. government, which ICE without warrants is doing, which is illegal. The 12th Article of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is equivalent. Article 12, no one shall be subject to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence, or attacks upon his honor and reputation. Everyone has a right to protection of law against such interference and attacks. Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The 5th Amendment gives numerous protections for individuals accused of crimes, such as serious criminal charges, have to be started by a grand jury, that an individual cannot be tried twice for the same crime, double jeopardy. Individuals have the right against self-incrimination and cannot be imprisoned without due process, so fair procedures and fair trials, nor have their property taken away from them without just compensation. Okay, so the 6th Amendment gives numerous additional protections to individuals that are accused of crimes, such as being informed of their criminal charges, the right to a speedy and public trial, and the right to trial by impartial jury in their criminal cases, and to be allowed representation by a lawyer, to have their own witnesses, and to face the witnesses against them. The 7th Amendment gives them additional rights, including the extended right to a jury trial in their federal civil cases. The 8th Amendment disallows excessive fines and excessive bail, as well as cruel and unusual punishment. The 9th Amendment itself outright states that listing specific rights in the Constitution does not mean that individuals do not have other rights that are not listed or spelled in the Constitution. And again, I'm about to go directly to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, so 1 second on that. Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So before I go, let me go back to that case. So again, the Trump administration is, again, legally, again, they are violating constitutional laws. They are violating numerous articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So Articles 1 through 20, and I'll actually go through all of them, by the way, which the U.S. did sign and ratify into law as well. So in the case we, the United States, actually have to follow them. This is why it's necessary as a U.S. citizen for you to report human rights violations to the United Nations to ensure and enforce human rights here in the United States that Trump and his administration are illegally breaking. Trump is not only breaking our own national laws, which is, again, the constitutional law, but he is violating international law. So the Articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which, of course, the U.S. did sign and ratify into law. So it's a human rights treaty that we, the United States of America, actually have to abide by. This is why it's important to report these human rights violations to necessarily ensure Trump administration abides by them, and if not, then, of course, legally throw them to the courts, to the ICC, if necessary. So for sanctions, and, of course, Trump and his administration, all the people that are, like Stephen Miller, all these perpetrators, and they are perpetrators concerning these laws that they are breaking, and, of course, and not excluding the ethnic cleansing that Trump is doing right now. So Donald J. Trump is an ethnic cleanser, and he, of course, so occupation for the United States, so MAGA, whatever. So Kristi Noem, and the director of the Department of Homeland Security, so affiliation, so Make America Great Again, ethnic cleanser. So, Stephen Miller, the advisor to the President of the United States of America, so Make America Great Again, neo-Nazi, and this is affirmed, by the way, and architect of Trump's zero-tolerance immigration policy where children were placed in cages, and an ethnic cleanser. The victim, Martir Garcia Lora, is formerly a fourth-grade student in Torrance, California. As a child, he is nominally protected by the Convention of the Rights of the Child. As a certified human rights consultant, certified child rights consultant, certified by the U.S. Institute of Diplomacy and Human Rights, the United States of America, while it did sign the Convention of the Rights of the Child, it did not ratify it into law, thus allowing these human rights abuses to the victim, which I am reporting as a child rights and human rights consultant. While not a lawyer, I am legal counsel for international law, specifically human rights. So I've taken up this case to the Office of the High Commissioner of the Human Rights Council, representing the NGO I am a part of, the U.S. Institute of Diplomacy and Human Rights, as well as a priest. I represent the Catholic Church and the Catholic Church's stance against Trump's mass deportation program, which was correctly ruled as ethnic cleansing. I will reiterate this fact. Yes, in Trump's mass deportation program, his remigration campaign that is correctly ruled as ethnic cleansing according to the U.S. definition of ethnic cleansing since Trump took office in January 2025. ICE has been rounding up, arbitrarily arresting people, citizens and immigrants alike, and detaining them and deporting them, those whose nationalities, ethnicities that Trump despises, often without valid signed warrants, breaking both constitutional law amendments 4 to 10 of the U.S. Bill of Rights and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Articles 1 through 20, which the U.S. did sign and ratify in law, as well as the case of the victim of this human rights violation, a minor, to the Convention of the Rights of the Child, specifically Articles 1 through 10, 11, 16, and many more. So, in their complicity to carry out unlawful actions in the Trump administration's ethnic cleansing campaign. When it comes to child separation, trauma is intentional, so psychological trauma of children, especially the victim, Martir Garcia Lora, so the intentional breaking of the Geneva Convention in this case. And again, I'll have linked my human rights campaign, so you can actually look at it, and again, and I'll reiterate this, I converted my human rights campaign directly into a case to the UN's Office of the High Commissioner of the Human Rights Council to ensure that there is legal accountability. The thousands of children that were ripped away from their families, and of course, with everything that's happening today, this is why it's important that we as Christians, especially, and we as Catholics, have to stand up against this evil and wrong legally, lawfully, peacefully, and ensure legal accountability. Through legal accountability, the person gets to atone for what they've done. They get the spiritual help and especially the mental health help that they desperately need. And yes, racism is a mental illness. They get to know of God. They get to repent and are ultimately forgiven. So, let's take a look at the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So before I get further into this, and I do apologize for the length of this video. The original video is like 47 minutes long, so this is going to be way longer. But, again, I have to teach you what your human rights are and how you can directly report human rights violations. So, what Trump is doing, the ruling is ethnic cleansing, according to the UN's definition of ethnic cleansing. The Trump administration, Donald J. Trump, Stephen Miller, Kristi Noem, Marco Rubio, etc., everyone who is complicit in this remigration campaign, they are all ethnic cleansers by default. Again, complicity to evil is still evil. So, let's take a look. So, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Sorry, you can see all the stuff around. But to be fair, I didn't put up my studio today because I wasn't expecting to go do this video. But again, with everything that I've had to look through the past number of days, yeah. So the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the UDHR, is a milestone document in the history of human rights, drafted by representatives of the different legal and cultural backgrounds from all regions of the world. The Declaration was proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly in Paris on December 10th, 1948. As a common standard of achievement for all peoples and all nations, it sets out for the first time fundamental human rights to be universally protected and has been translated in over 500 languages. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is widely recognized as having inspired and paved the way for the adoption of many more than 70 human rights treaties applied today on a permanent basis at global and regional levels, all containing references to it and their preambles. So take a look at the preamble. Whereas recognition of the inherent dignity of the equal and inalienable rights of all members, the human family, is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. Whereas disregard and contempt for human rights have resulted in barbarous acts which have outraged the conscience of mankind, to the advent of the world in which human beings shall enjoy freedom of speech and belief and freedom from fear and want, have been proclaimed at the highest aspiration of the common people. Whereas it is essential if man is not to be compelled to have recourse as last resort to rebellion against tyranny and oppression, that human rights should be protected by the rule of law, whereas it is essential to promote the development of friendly relations between nations. Whereas the peoples of the United Nations have the Charter reaffirming their faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and the worth of human person and the equal rights of men and women, have determined to promote social progress and better standards of life and larger freedom. Whereas member states have pledged themselves to achieve, in cooperation with the United Nations, the promotion of universal respect for and observance of human rights and fundamental freedoms. Whereas a common understanding of these rights and freedoms is of greatest importance for the full realization of this pledge. Now, therefore, the General Assembly proclaims this Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a common standard of achievement of all peoples and all nations, to the end that every individual and every organ of society, keeping this declaration constant in mind, shall strive by teaching and education to promote respect for these rights and these freedoms of high progressive measures, national and international, to secure their universal effective recognition and observance, both among the peoples of member states themselves and among the peoples of territories under their jurisdiction. So let's take a look at Article 1. All human beings are born free and equal dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in the spirit of brotherhood. A.k.a. every human being is born free and equal in dignity and human rights. So Article 2. Everyone is entitled to the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political, or other opinion, national, social origin, property, birth, or other status. Furthermore, no distinction shall be made on the basis of the political, jurisdictional, or international status of the country or territory to which a person belongs, whether it be independent, trust, or non-self-governing, or under any other limitation of sovereignty. Article 3. Everyone has a right to life, liberty, and security of person. A.k.a. everyone has a right to life. Everyone has a right to not have their life taken from them. So, summary executions, etc. So again, the genocide that the Nazis did, certainly. And, of course, the genocide that we saw in the Israel-Gaza war, of course, as of today, well, more like yesterday, the UN has, at least ICC, has decreed that Israel's war is a war of extermination. So again, this is why genocide is applicable to Israel, while, of course, ethnic cleansing is correctly attributable to Donald J. Trump and his administration. So, Article 4. No one shall be held in slavery or servitude. Slavery and slave trade shall be prohibited in all forms, a.k.a. you have a right to not be a slave, a.k.a. everyone shall be not enslaved. And this is Article 4 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So, this is why it's important concerning the sex trade and everything. This is why we have to safeguard the victims of sex trafficking as well. Article 5. No one shall be subject to torture or cruel and inhumane, degrading treatment or punishment, aka no one shall be tortured. And this is Article 5, so concerning Martir Garcia Lora, of whom separating from his family, from his parent, so again, as the Trump administration previously did during the Trump zero tolerance immigration policy, where children were placed in cages separated from their families. Again, it was torture. It was psychological torture and intentional. So again, this is a breaking of the Geneva Convention. So again, Article 5, this is very important right here. No one shall be subject to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. Article 6. Everyone has a right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law. Article 7. All are equal before the law, are entitled without discrimination to equal protection in law. All are entitled to equal protection against any discrimination and violation of this declaration against any incitement of such discrimination, aka all are equal before the law and are entitled without discrimination to equal protection in the law. All are entitled to protection against discrimination of themselves and of their rights. Article 8. Everyone has a right to effective remedy by the competent national tribunals for acts violating the fundamental rights granted them by the Constitution or by the law, aka everyone has due process. Article 9, and this is the thing that Trump has been violating repeatedly since he took office in January. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile. Again, Article 9. No one shall be subject to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile. Article 10. Everyone is entitled to full equality to a fair trial and public hearing by independent and impartial tribunal to the determination of his rights and obligations of any criminal charge against him, aka everyone has a right to a free trial, everyone has a right to due process. Article 11. Everyone charged with a penal offense has a right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty according to law. So, aka, everyone charged with a crime is to be presumed innocent until proven guilty by a court of law. at which he has all the guarantees necessary for his defense. No one shall be held guilty of any penal offense on account of any act or omission which did not constitute a penal offense, nor under national or international law at the time which was committed, nor shall a heavier penalty be imposed than the one that has applicable at the time the penal offense was committed. Article 12. No one shall be subject to arbitrary interference in his privacy, family, home, or correspondence, nor tax upon his honor and reputation. Everyone has a right to protection of the law against such interference and tax, aka everyone has a right to not be spied upon, everyone has a right to not have themselves or their property seized by the government. Okay, Article 13, everyone has a right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state. Everyone has a right to leave any country, including his own, and the right to return to his own country, aka everyone has a right to travel, to leisure, everyone has a right to freedom of movement. And this, of course, is applicable to here in the United States, so everyone who's, for example, so those individuals who are traveling to states that don't have abortion bans to get an abortion, for example, they have a right of freedom of movement. Again, this is a guaranteed right in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which the United States did sign and ratify into law, so we have to follow it either way. So, Article 14, everyone has a right to seek and enjoy another country's asylum from persecution. This right may not be invoked in the case of prosecutions genuinely arising from non-political crimes or from acts contrary to the purposes and principles of the United Nations, aka everyone has a right to seek and enjoy another country's asylum, aka everyone has a right to asylum. That's Article 14 of Article 30. Article 15, everyone has a right to nationality. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his nationality, nor denied the right to change his nationality, aka everyone has a right to nationality. Article 16, men and women full of age without any limitation due to race, nationality, or religion have the right to marry and to found a family. They are entitled to equal rights as a marriage, during marriage, and as dissolution. Marriage shall be entered into only with free and full consent of the intending spouses. The family is a natural and fundamental group unit of the society and is entitled to protection by society and the state, aka everyone has a right to marry. Everyone has a right to marriage, and of course, everyone has a right to divorce. Article 17. Everyone has a right to own property alone as well as in association with others. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of their property, aka everyone has a right to property and to own property. Article 18. Everyone has a right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or his belief, and freedom either alone, in a community, or others, in the public, private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. aka everyone has a right to freedom of thought, to religion. So Article 1, so Amendment 1 of our Constitution. So the right to religion, so the right to freedom of expression, opinion, which goes directly into Article 19. Everyone has a right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers, aka everyone has a right to freedom of expression, to hold opinions without interference, and seek, receive, and impart information. So freedom of the press, freedom of thought, and of course you got freedom of religion. So our First Amendment of the Constitution. And again, U.S. Bill of Rights. So let me go back up to Article 1. The First Amendment. Congress shall not make no law respecting establishment of religion, nor prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or arbitrating the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble. And again, this is, First Amendment, which Trump is going to definitely revoke. So, the freedom of speech, the freedom to assemble, so the freedom to peaceably protest and petition the government for redress of grievances. So, back to Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Again, Article 20, everyone has a right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. No one may be compelled to belong to association, aka everyone has a right to trade unions, and of course, everyone has a right to peaceful assembly, so aka everyone has a right to protest as well. This is a guaranteed right in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Article 21. Everyone has a right to take part in the government of the country, directly or through freely chosen representatives. Everyone has a right to equal access to public service in this country. The will of the people shall be the basis of the authority of the government. This will shall be expressed in the periodic and genuine elections, which shall be universal and equal suffrage, and shall be held by secret vote or by equivalent free voting procedures, aka everyone has a right to vote, everyone has a right to elections, everyone has a right to participate in their elections, either running as a candidate or by being part of the voting process. Article 22. Everyone is a member of society, has a right to societal social security, and entitled to realization through national effort and international cooperation and in accordance with the organization and resources of each state of the economic, social, and cultural rights indispensable for his dignity and free development of his personality. aka everyone has a right to social security, everyone has a right to welfare, everyone is entitled to that societal protection. And this directly goes to Article 23. Everyone has a right to work, to free choice of employment, just and favorable conditions of work, and protection against unemployment. Everyone without any discrimination has a right to equal pay for equal work. Everyone who works has a right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for himself and his family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplement, if necessary, by other means of social protection. Everyone has a right to form and join trade unions for the protection of his interests, aka everyone has a right to join trade unions, form unions, etc. Everyone has a right to work as a choice, their freedom of choice of employment and of just and favorable conditions, and they have a right to equal pay. And of course, they have a right to unemployment benefits. And that is Article 23 summed up. Article 24. Everyone has a right to rest and leisure, including a reasonable limitation of working hours and periodic holidays with pay, aka everyone has a right to vacation. Everyone has a right to have time off. Everyone has a right to leisure. So Article 25. Everyone has a right to standard living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care, and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control. Mother and child are entitled to special care and assistance. All children, whether born in or out of wedlock, shall enjoy the same social protection, aka everyone has a right to welfare. Everyone has a right to social security. Everyone has a right to social services. And that is Article 25. Article 26. Everyone has a right to an education. Education shall be free, at least in the elementary and fundamental stages. Elementary education shall be compulsory. Technical professional education shall be made generally available, and the higher education shall be equally accessible to all the basis of merit. Education shall be directed to the full development of the human personality and to the strengthening and respect to human rights and fundamental freedoms. It shall promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship among all nations, racial or religious groups, and shall further the activities of the United Nations for the maintenance of peace. Parents have a prior right to choose a kind of education that shall be given to their children. aka everyone has a right to an education. Everyone has a right to higher learning. Everyone has a right to education. And parents do have a right to choose a kind of education that shall be given to their children. So Article 27, everyone has a right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts and share in scientific advancement and its benefits. Everyone has a right to protection of moral and material interests resulting from any scientific, literary, or artistic production in which he is the author, aka everyone has a right to participate in the cultural life, in the arts, sciences, community, etc. And of course, everyone has a right to be paid, especially for their art. And this is why I am against AI. Art, specifically. Because it robs the artists of their pay. Article 28. Everyone is entitled to a social or international order in which the rights and freedoms set forth in the Declaration shall be fully realized. aka everyone has a right to the United Nations. Everyone has a right to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That is Article 28 summed up. Article 29. Everyone has duties to community in which alone and free and full development of personality as possible. In the exercise of his rights and freedoms, everyone shall be subject only to limitations as is determined by law, solely for the purposes of securing due recognition in respect to the rights and freedoms of others, and of meeting the just requirements of morality, public order, and the general welfare in a democratic society. These rights and freedoms may in no case be exercised contrary to the purposes and principles of the United Nations, aka everyone has a right to freedom and to the development of their personality, their right to develop, for that matter. Everyone has a right to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and once upon learning their rights, their moral duty to ensure a democratic society is to teach these human rights to others. And of course, no one has a right to take away other people's rights. That is Article 29. So, aka, no one has a right to take away other people's rights, and everyone who learns the Universal Declaration of Human Rights or learns their human rights has the moral obligation to teach human rights to others and to help ensure a democratic society. Article 30. Nothing in this declaration may be interpreted as implying for any state, group, or person any right to engage in any activity or to perform any act aimed at the destruction of any of the rights and freedoms set forth therein. aka nothing in this declaration can be interpreted as taking away people's rights by any nation, state, or group. And this is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, so all 30 articles. So now that you know what your human rights are, again, now that you know what your human rights are, your first duty is to teach these human rights to others. I'll have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights linked to this video, of course, and how to report human rights violations. And now, to finish up this video, let's go back to what I was doing concerning reporting human rights violations. So again, as stated in my May update, and I will reiterate this again, Again, I'll reiterate this. How to report human rights violations from the United for Human Rights org. You can and you should report human rights abuses, even if they are not prosecuted publicly, or the prospect of an investigation can have a restraining effect on the perpetrators. List the specific articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that have been violated. State the facts as far as possible in chronological order, including the date, time, and place of the incidents, name and position of the perpetrators, place of detention if applicable, names and addresses of any witnesses, and any other important details. So again, back to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and I will reiterate this. So back to Article 14, and I will reiterate this. Article 14, everyone has a right to seek asylum. Everyone has a right to nationality. Article 13, everyone has a right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state, and everyone has a right to leave any country, including their own, and to return to their own country. Everyone has a right to travel. Everyone has a right to immigrate. And this is Articles 13 through 15 summed up. Everyone has a right to immigrate. Everyone has a right to seek asylum. So, back to reporting human rights violations. How to submit a complaint. So, special procedures, mechanisms can intervene directly with states and non-state actors, including businesses and intergovernment organizations, of alleged human rights violations that come with their mandates by meeting exchanging letters. Who can submit a complaint? Any of the following claim to be victims of alleged violations or claim to have credible information on those allegations. So, individuals, groups or individuals or communities, civil society organizations, national human rights bodies. In my case, as a certified human rights consultant, certified at the U.S. Institute of Diplomacy and Human Rights, so as a international law counsel, so again, I'm part of the U.S. Institute of Diplomacy and Human Rights. This is my non-government organization that I am a part of, that I'm certified under. So this is why civil society organizations, and of course as a priest of the Catholic Church necessarily, a non-Nicene priest I might add, and this is why with these two, why I actually do these human rights complaint cases of the UN, and why you as individuals, if you see anything, have anything on video concerning Trump's human rights violations, you submit this information directly to these human rights organizations, like Amnesty International, etc., and of course the UN. And I'm going to be reiterating that. Sorry, so right back. So again, the UN, and let's actually go right there. So organizations you can report to. So again, how to report human rights abuses. Again, you can and you should report human rights abuses even if they are not prosecuted publicly, or the process of an investigation can have restraining effects on perpetrators. One lists of specific articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that have been violated. So now that you know what the articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights are, you can report these. 2. State the facts as far as possible in chronological order. 3. Include the date, time, and place of the incidents, name and position of the perpetrators, place of detention, applicable names and addresses of any witnesses, or any other important details. Organizations to report to, and this is going to be important right here: Amnesty International, Human Rights Action Center, Human Rights Watch, so the Children's Defense Fund, so UNICEF for that matter, and other organizations. So get involved. And again, I'm going to have this link to this video. So again, as an individual or groups of individual communities, civil society organizations, national human rights bodies, what is the eligible criteria to submit a complaint? Each expert will determine whether he will take action upon submission on the basis of information received and the scope of his or her mandate. This decision depends upon all criteria laid out in the Code of Conduct for Experts. There is no need to have first exhausted all domestic remedies. Oh my gosh. So, sorry about that jumble there. Again, I'm holding this handheld. So, who can make a complaint against any member state of the United Nations without need that they have ratified specific human rights treaties? So, again, for the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which the United States did sign but did not ratify into law, for example, or the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which Trump is violating numerous articles of it, by the way, directly, and that's excluding as ethnic cleansing, which is correctly ruled as ethnic cleansing. So international government organizations, non-state actors, including businesses, what can you complain about? Any aspect of human rights covered by the special procedures mandates for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, in other words. It's a complaint procedure public. Letters sent to the governments by special procedures mandate holders remain confidential for a maximum of 60 days. Letters sent to governments or draft legislation policies remain confidential for a maximum of 2 working days. And the thing about your complaint is that it is going to be confidential concerning you as the individual who wrote it. But of course, the complaint will not remain confidential after 60 days. So what are the advantages and impacts of making a complaint to a specific mechanism? You can complain about violations which have not happened yet but have a high risk of occurring. You can complain about draft legislation, policy, or practice considered to be non-fully compatible with international human rights norms and standards. The procedure is very agile. You do not need to have exhausted domestic remedies. The state you complain about does not have to have ratified a specific human rights treaty. But of course, the United States did sign the Convention on the Rights of the Child. It also did sign the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but also ratified the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. However, it did not ratify the Convention on the Rights of the Child. So both of these are applicable. The procedure can be used in a parallel with other international and regional complaint procedures. The outcome is transparent. The letters sent and replies received are all made publicly available once the confidentiality period is over. What happens when I submit a complaint? When received, this information is screened and directed to relevant special procedures mandate holders. The experts will examine the information received to determine whether to take up the case or not. If one or more experts decide to take up the specific case, you will not be notified. The letter addressing the case becomes public on the public communication site and in one of the 3 reports submitted to the Human Rights Council each year. How long does it take? The special procedures strive to act as quickly as possible. Attention is given to the most serious and urgent cases. Cases may be taken up within 24 hours of submission. However, it may take longer, particularly when sufficient information is not available in the submission. What are the next steps in making a complaint? Use the online submission tool or submit complaint via email, plus voila. And this is the online submission tool, which we'll be going to. So again, the special procedure of the Human Rights Council. And now you're here at the Office of the High Commissioner of the Human Rights, right here. So introduction and special procedures, which of course we just did. So, what are communications? So communication are letters sent by the special procedures to governments and others such as international government organizations, business, military, or security companies. In these letters, the experts report on allegations of human rights violations they have received regarding past human rights violations, which can be object of letter or allegation, or ongoing potential human rights violation, which can be the object of an urgent appeal, concerns relating to bills, legislation, policies, or practices that do not comply with international human rights law and standards. The expert in the law present the allegations and request classifications on them. Where it is necessary, the experts request that the concerned authorities take action to prevent or to stop the violation, investigate it, bring justice to those responsible, and make sure the remedies are available to the victims or their families. The experts also recall the applicable human rights provisions in these letters. There are other procedures applicable to working group or arbitrary detention and working group or enforced or involuntary disappearances. Please consult the message working here. So with all these people being with all these people that are being disappeared to the concentration camp in El Salvador, for example. So that's human trafficking that the Trump administration did to all these people that they sent there, which of course included Alberto Garcia. So again, what are the purposes of communications? The purpose of communications are for the special procedures to draw the attention of governments and other alleged human rights violations, ask if violations are prevented, stopped, investigated, or that remedial action is taken, report to the Human Rights Council on communications sent and replies received, therefore raising public awareness on individual and group cases, as well as legislative and policy developments they have addressed in a given period. What do communications address? The communications address allegations of violation of the human rights of one or more individuals, allegations of violation of the human rights of a group or community, allegations that a bill, a law, a decree, a policy, and or practice is not in compliance with international human rights law standards. What criteria applied to act on a submission? Each expert will decide whether he or she will take action to give a submission on the basis of information received in the scope of his or her mandate. The should depend on criteria laid down in the code of conduct, blah, blah, blah. Communication that manifests and found political motivated. Communication not containing factual description of alleged violations of human rights. And it should contain the factual description of alleged human rights. The language of communication should not be abusive. The communication should be submitted on the basis of credible and detailed information. Communication should not be exclusively based on reports disseminated by the mass media. And that's the point. The communication should not be exclusively based on reports disseminated by the mass media. And this is why, and it came down to my human rights of course, my human rights campaign to the UN, which, of course, got converted to human rights trace directly to the UN. So why the United States of America should adopt the Convention of Human Rights. So the child, again, is upon a lot of research and excluding, and it wasn't entirely on reports disseminated by the mass media, but this is the point. You can report these human rights abuses to the UN, and you can use mass media too, but you need to use other sources as well. Specifically, for example, if you record ICE agents doing what they do, with these arbitrary arrests, detentions, etc., these constitutional law violations that they're doing, especially without signed warrants, report this to the United Nations, report this to Amnesty International and all these other organizations. This is your duty, first and foremost. Again, report these violations that are happening so that eventually the victims of these abuses will get their justice. It may take forever, of course. It may take longer than your own lifetime. And this is why, as a priest and as a certified human rights consultant, this is the main reason why I specifically create and submit these reports to the United Nations myself. I've done 10 so far in 12, 13 weeks. And this is the point. You can do this too. You can send these credible, detailed reports directly to the United Nations. And I will reiterate this concerning my human rights update for May, which I was reading off of. And I will reiterate this. As a certified human rights consultant, I also link you to the United Nations Human Rights Office, the High Commissioner, where you can report human rights violations directly to the UN. Link to the United Nations Human Rights Office, High Commissioner, reporting violations, blah, blah, blah. I'll have this in this video, by the way. Again, everyone, please learn your human rights. This is the most important. Advocate for your rights, and more importantly, others' rights. Sign and share these human rights campaigns against Trump administration, but more importantly, directly report human rights violations that the Trump administration is doing. His remigration campaign, his mass deportation program, which is correctly ruled as ethnic cleansing, according to the United Nations definition of ethnic cleansing. So again, Pope Francis several months ago decreed Trump is anti-life, a threat to human life, which I covered in my last sermon, for example, and I've certainly covered in my past human rights video. Again, is the Trump administration guilty of human rights violations / ethnic cleansing by the UN's definition of ethnic cleansing? The answer is yes. Can the Trump administration be trusted with children, let alone human life? With the revoking of human rights, mass deportations are just fueled by racism, xenophobia, mental illness, to say the least? Logically, no. From a psychological perspective, when it comes to psychology, we as humans are creatures of habit. There are patterns of behavior, so there are no blue moon isolated incidents. There is only premeditation, in this case involving the desire to harm, remove, and revoke human rights, especially due process and habeas corpus of their current victims and future victims. And I do not state that again, I do not state this lightly. What we are seeing is depravity, pure and simple depravity. As I talked about in my last sermon, it is open rebellion against God and far worse. So again, we as Christians, as Catholics, and as beings with good morals and good ethics, cannot be apathetic to this evil. Complacent / complicit evil. Dietrich Bonhoeffer in this quote defines apathy to evil succinctly in this quote. Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold guiltless, does not speak as to speak, do not act as to act. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Again, I will leave with these two other quotes. So, terrible things are happening outside. At any time of night and day, poor helpless people are being dragged out of their homes, They are allowed to take only a knapsack and a little cash with them, even then, they're robbed of these possessions on the way. Families are torn apart. Men, women, children are separated. Children come home from school to find that their parents have disappeared, and this is by Anne Frank. Again, things do exist that are worth standing up for without compromise. To me, that seems that peace and social justice are such things, as is Christ himself. This is by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And one thing that we as Christians are given is, and I'm going to reiterate this. So let the fellowship of Christ examine itself and see whether it has given any token of love of Christ to the victims of the world's continual contempt, any token of that love of Christ which seeks to preserve, support, and protect life. Otherwise, however correct our serves are, however devout our prayer, however brave our testimony, they will profit us nothing. Nay, rather, they must needs testify against us if we of church have ceased to follow our Lord. This is by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And again, Dietrich Bonhoeffer is outlining in that statement, in this quote, that we as a church have a godly and moral responsibility to protect the victims of hatred and wrong. If we do not, we are not in service of Christ no matter what. And speaking of, do not allow yourself the inability to love others. This is what happened to Trump supporters / Christian nationalists, especially with their complicity to evil, or the apathy for that matter, so complacency. Father Gabriel Amroth puts out this succinctly in this quote: the ability to love come from grace is much reduced to those who do not know Christ, even more so those who do know him, but do not follow him, a choice that assumes a serious sin. Father Gabriel Amroth. And Father Gabriel Amroth's ruling, love comes from God, is much reduced to those who do not know Christ, aka non-believers, even more so in those who do know him, but choose not to follow him, aka fallen Christians who profess to be of Christ, but have hatred in their hearts for others. They do not have God's Holy Spirit, are not saved, no matter what they profess, so do not believe them and do not count them as part of the body of Christ. They are not Christian, no matter what they profess. This is the ruling. Their lack of empathy for others from a psychological perspective, they cannot be trusted with human life either. And in my previous human rights, sorry, I do have my dog with me, as you can tell. So yeah, in my studio. And I'm going to reiterate this. Again, from a psychological perspective, they cannot be trusted with human life either. And that lack of empathy for others is systematic concerning psychosis. So, of course, all the Trump supporters, accordingly, as I talked about in my last human rights teaching, they are all suffering from mass psychosis. And I will reiterate this concerning the psychology of all of this. Again, can the Trump administration be trusted with children, let alone human life? With the revoking human rights, mass deportations that are fueled by racism, xenophobia, mental illness, to say the least? Logically, no. From a psychological perspective, when it comes to psychology, we as humans are creatures of habit. There are patterns to behavior, so there is no blue moon isolated instance. There is only premeditation, in this case involving desire to harm, remove, and revoke human rights, especially due process and habeas corpus of their current victims and future victims. Again, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold guiltless, to not speak is to speak, to not act is to act. Anyways, everyone, thank you for taking the time to listen to, or actually watch this short human rights teaching. And mind you, I did not plan to do this one at all. But again, I wanted to reiterate what I wanted to try to teach on my Instagram last week. But now on the plus side, at least I can. So, again, learn your human rights, most importantly. Second, protect others and their rights. Third, most important thing, again, report human rights violations to the United Nations. And again, so, how to report human rights violations. Again, you should report human rights abuses, even if they are not prosecuted publicly or the prospect of investigation can have a restraining effect on the perpetrators. 1. List the specific articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that have been violated. 2. State the facts as far as possible in chronological order. 3. Include the date, time, and place of the incidents, name and position of the perpetrators, place of detention if applicable, names and address of any witnesses, and any other important details. Organization to report to: Amnesty International, Human Rights Action Center, Human Rights Watch, Child Defense Fund, other organizations. So again, everyone, stay safe. And again, learn your human rights. Again, defend others' rights. Again, of course, with Article 29, once you learn your human rights, you are to teach them to others. So again, learn your human rights and help defend other human rights. Again, to help defend and protect the democratic process. So anyways, everyone, stay safe. God bless. Don Diaz. And again, know your human rights and report them to Amnesty International, Human Rights Action Center, Human Rights Watch, and of course the Office of the High Commissioner of the Human Rights Council. These are our legal options as U.S. citizens. These are our legal options as human beings. To know our human rights and to report when these human rights are being violated. So again, have your phones, take audio, visible recordings, have witnesses, and report these human rights violations to the UN and more. Anyways, everyone, stay safe out there, okay? God bless.